Celeste.
How are you doing?
I'm doing terrific. So happy to be here with all of you today. All right, let's get rolling. So, the question here as we start talking about communications this morning, and this is communicating to influence. How do you get someone to change the way they think or act about your topic? About the way they think or act about you. And in doing that, let me just set up and begin with a question here. And that is this: what experience do you create? Because regardless of whether you like it or not, every time you open up your mouth to speak, you're creating some kind of experience for someone. So I want you to think even broader than communications here. What kind of experience do you create when you open up your mouth? Is it one that engenders trust and rapport and likability, or does it maybe do the opposite? And so, excuse me. So we thought, gosh, if we were trying to figure this out, wouldn't it be helpful to be able to map your experience? And if we think about this as a way to direct ourselves, and you think, gosh, what do I put into a GPS in order for that thing to actually work? You have to put in a destination, you have to put in an address, and then you can figure out the right way to get there. It takes you there. But oftentimes, when it comes to communication, we don't think about it that way because we're not thinking about the experience that we create. So, but my husband and I, we run our company together, Decker Communications. We wrote a book that Celeste just mentioned. I'm excited that everybody's going to be vying for a copy of the book. We wrote a book called Communicate to Influence. And in that, we said, all right, can we give people a map? Could they actually input a destination when it comes to creating their own communication experience? And then how do we get there? So we created this communicators roadmap. This is a foundation for everything that we're going to talk about here today and how you can think about your own experience. So let me walk through this. On this horizontal axis here, we have that of content. Content is the words that you're saying. So it ranges from self-centered content to audience-centered content. Self-centered isn't like egotistical and it's all about me, but it's more of your subject matter expertise that you're trying to get across. It's more of the agenda that you're trying to drive. On the flip side, you have audience centered content. So, how do you take all of that and make it even more relevant to the audience? Then on the vertical axis, we have that of emotional connection, and that's either high or low. And when we think about emotional connection, we're thinking about things like trust, rapport, likability, believability, and how do you engender that in your communication experience. Now, where these two intersect create a couple of different experiences. In the lower left, we have that of inform. So you have kind of the self-centered content, it's your subject matter expertise, but it's kind of a lower emotional connection. You can all think about a really, really boring professor that you've had. So you're in it to learn the content, they're sharing their subject matter expertise, but they're just kind of not super engaging communicators. And so they have that low emotional connection with you. They're just informing you, and you're trying to take in as much information as possible. In the upper left, we have that of entertain. So you can think about late night talk show hosts, sports commentators when there are sports on TV. All of those sorts of experiences are meant to entertain. So it's their content, but they have this really high emotional connection that makes them likable, builds rapport, and so they have create this entertaining experience. Now, in the lower right is where we find a lot of leaders that we work with. So when we're doing our executive one-on-one coaching, this is where we find a lot where they're good at creating messages that are very audience focused, but maybe not don't have that emotional connection that they could play at. Now, here's where we can all aspire to be, and that's in the quadrant of inspire. And if inspire is too strong of a word for you, think about influence here. Think about influence and inspiring others to change the way they think or act about your message. And so it doesn't matter where you end up on this map. So you could be in any single one of these quadrants. And whether you're inform or direct or entertain or inspire, you can be in any one of those. It's not that one is bad and one is good or anything like that. But the point is that did you intentionally map your direction there? And so for all of you, as you're thinking about the various communication situations that you are in, I want you to be thinking about interviews that you have. I mean, these could be like thesis challenges that you're bringing if you're in graduate school. So all these different communications that you're telling, maybe it's an organization that you're involved in. And think about how you might be able to pinpoint where you want to go. Because the thing that would stink is if you said, gosh, I'd really like to inspire people to get involved in this cause, or be involved in this organization, or take advantage of this idea that I have around this, and you wanted to inspire them to change the way they think or act, but you ended up informing them just because you didn't intentionally think about that experience that you're creating. So that's what today is all about. And the beautiful thing is that the audience response, here's what happens. It shifts from a place of, okay, I'll do it because I have to, I'll do it because I want to. I'm all in. Show me the way. So this is particularly important for leaders of an organization, and you are those future leaders of the organizations here. So as you think about that, how do I move them not from a place of direct authority, okay, and you get people to say, all right, I'll do it because I have to, but how do you get them to move to, I'll do it because I want to, I'm all in, show me the way. That's where we're going with all of this. So that you never have to miss an opportunity to connect, to influence, to inspire. So again, whatever those different situations that you're in, I want you to be thinking about those. And they will apply to both professional as well as your personal life as well. You will see communications kind of needed all the time. So it could be a one-on-one, it could be a class presentation, an interview, team meetings, all those sorts of things. And all of this will apply. So let's break it down. This is going to be a really interactive session as much as possible. So do these silly little exercises along with me wherever you are. I'm coming to you, by the way, from just outside San Francisco in the East Bay. We have an office in San Francisco that I haven't been to in a really long time. I'm looking forward to getting back there. So again, welcome to all of you joining all over the country. Just so happy to be here with you. So what counts in communicating? So if we break it down in an in-person experience and over Zoom, when we're technically in person here over video, we have the 3 V's of communicating. So we have the verbal, that's the content of the message itself. Those are the words that you're saying. You have the vocal, that's the sound, the tone, the pitch, projection of your voice, what people hear. And then finally you have the visual, and that's what people see of you as you're communicating with them. So I just want everybody to think for a second, if you were to rank what you think counts in communicating, what do you think? Maybe jot it down on a piece of paper as you're taking some notes. What do you think counts most in communicating? Is it the verbal? Is it the words? Is it the sound and tone of your voice? Is it how you come across? Maybe jot that down. So be thinking, gosh, is verbal most or equal importance? Is vocal most or equal importance? Is visual most or equal importance? All right, before I show you the answers, before we move on, I want everybody to do a quick exercise with me. Okay, so everyone do this. Take your right hand, make a peace sign. Everybody do this. All right, hold it out in front of you. Hold it above your head. Hold it out to the side. Now put it on your chin. Put it on your chin. On your chin. Did I get you? All right, so most of the time when I do this exercise live, of course I can see everybody doing it, and I can see about 92% of the room have their peace sign resting on their cheek, not their chin. So what's most important when it comes to communicating as we think about these 3 V's? So we'll go back to the numbers here, and this is from a classic study done by Professor Albert Mehrabian out of UCLA. He wrote a book called Silent Messages, and these numbers reflect that. So take a look at these numbers, and some of you may have seen this in Speech 101. This is a classic study that gets brought up over and over and over. It's also one of the most misinterpreted pieces of research out there, because people go, oh, well, doesn't matter what I say. If I just look really good as I say it, it'll be amazing. Well, that's not the case at all. And that's not what Albert Mehrabian found. He found that when you have an inconsistent message, that is when the words that you say don't match how you come across as you say them, people believe the visual cue and the vocal cue over the actual words themselves. That's why I said chin, but you saw cheek, and the visual cue dominated. So we have an inconsistent message, the visual cue dominates, and that's what you hear. Now, when I speak with leaders and we go back to that research, I say, where do you spend your time in preparing? Where do you spend your time? When you think about those three V's, where do you spend your time preparing? Is it the verbal? Is it the vocal? Is it the visual? And it's pretty much the verbal. When it comes to preparing, they think, gosh, I'm just thinking about the words that I'm saying, not about how they come across. And when we don't do that, we could miss the message completely. It could be a totally different message. So we have to remember that that message comes through us. So the key here is, how do you create this consistent message, both in the words that you're saying, and as we think back to the roadmap, we're thinking about, how do we create really effective content that resonates with our listener? But then how do we deliver that in a way that's consistent? For example, if we're sharing good news, we should be able to see that on our faces as well. So it's that consistent message that we're going for, and not just leaving it at, okay, well, I constructed a really great message. Now what? Well, now you have to think about how to deliver it. So as we move on here, I love this saying that logic makes you, we buy on emotion and we justify with fact. Buy on emotion, we justify with fact. That message, and we're taught, as we advance in our careers, the reason that we spend so much time on that verbal component, on the message itself, is because we're taught that if we say the words, people are going to get it. If I just say the words, if I perfectly architect this message, people are going to get it and the message will land. But that's not the case, because the message comes through us. And so people buy off on us first, and then they justify with the facts. So we have this emotional connection to people first, and that comes out in that emotional connection piece on the roadmap that we talked about, which we're going to go into in just a minute. So that's the importance of the consistent message here. So as we think about this, building the emotional connection and shifting it from low to high, it's like, well, gosh, how do we do that? Great, we're going to talk about it. And again, think about all the different experiences that you can apply this to, because communications, this is not a public speaking program. This is not all about public speaking and nothing else. And we say the same thing to the leaders that we work with all the time, which is, hey, aren't you kind of always public speaking? You're always talking to someone. I mean, you might speak alone in your car or something, that's fine. But in general, you're always public speaking, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's a group of students, whether it's folks at your new workplace, whether it's new team members. We're always communicating with somebody. So how do we go ahead and do that? All right, let me have you look at this next video here. And this will just play. It plays without sound. And I want you to step back and just think about the experience of these two individuals who are standing side by side. And let's say you had to listen to one of these individuals for, I don't know, 30 minutes, an hour-long meeting. I'll just have you take a look here. Who would you rather listen to? Well, my guess is, and the majority of people would say, well, gosh, I would rather listen to her. So why is that? Why do we think about that? Well, we can now break that down. When we think about all of the things around emotional connection, it's about building these behaviors of trust. And these are critically important because people judge quickly. For example, you just saw that last clip, I don't know, for 5 seconds, maybe up to 10 seconds. You're watching that video clip, and in the blink of an eye, you already decided, who do I want to listen to? Who built more trust, possibly? Who built more rapport? Who was more likable? Whom I'm more willing to listen to? And we want to listen to her, and it has to do all with how they come across. So those visual and the vocal pieces of those 3 V's that we mentioned. So not talking about content yet, but let's talk about these behavioral skills, these skills and how you come across, because as we know, people buy on emotion and they justify with fact. And so these skills, we're not going to take every single one of these, but they have everything to do with, first, building that connection with your listener, then keeping that connection by way of energy, and finally, how we add some credibility to the message. So this is in this in-person experience that you have. But let's step back really quick and think about the situation that most of us are in now. And so if we took a look and we took they took these two individuals who, by the way, were talking about the exact same thing, just created a very different experience. We take a look at now how we're experiencing them in the remote and virtual environment, and now that experience shrinks, and it shrinks into this nice little screen here. So how do we think about this? Let me give you a couple of examples here. Here are some photos. You probably have seen things that look like this since COVID-19 has hit us and forced us all to school from home, work from home. You've probably seen people sort of out of frame, in frame, not in the frame. You've seen professors who are recording themselves from clear across the back. They're trying to connect with you, but they're not doing it effectively. So you've seen all of these situations. And so we'll talk and we'll hone in on those behavioral skills, specifically on how they relate to coming across virtually, because this is the world that we're going to be in for just a little bit longer. So as we think about the remote behaviors of trust, we'll think about connection and credibility. On the connection side of things, I want you to think mostly about eye communication. This will be critical for the interviews that you will undoubtedly have, many of which will likely be, whether or not you're meeting in person, but many of which, as you eventually do go back to school, that you'll continue to do these over Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams or any of the platforms that are out there. So you'll have this video component. And eye communication, for example, goes a long way. So let me kind of model this here for you. So right now, I am looking at that little green dot at the top of my computer that shows me where my webcam is. And that helps me connect more effectively. It feels like we're having a one-on-one conversation maybe, or a one-to-many conversation. But it feels like I'm connecting directly with you. Now that's different than, for example, if I was starting to talk like this, and then maybe I look over, and this happens in an in-person experience too. This isn't just a video conferencing situation, or maybe I'm here, or maybe I'm looking down at a screen down here, and I just don't have that same level of connection. So I point these things out because all of these behavioral skills don't seem like a big deal, but all of a sudden they add up and they create a really different experience of how you come across. So just breaking these down and starting to focus and pay attention to these. Here's what I love about all of this is that they're all just habits. All of these behavioral skills that we're talking about are habits that we can change. So eye communication is critical. Facial expression is critical. And as we think about the ways that we add credibility to our message, we do that through the tone of voice. And so if we went back to those 3 V's, and if you didn't have that visual component, if you didn't have the visual component at all of a sudden, the vocal has a huge, huge role, because this is where it ends up. So you think about if you don't have the opportunity to be on video and you just have someone's voice over the phone or over an audio conference, for example, then you're just hearing the sound of the voice. And so I've got a video clip here that I want to show you, and it highlights 3 individuals who are saying the exact same words, but they do it a little bit differently. I want you to pay particular attention to the vocal tone. If you were to hire one of these people to join you in the internship program, for example, if you were to hire somebody, who would you hire? Take a listen.
I believe I'm a great fit for this job because I have industry experience, a strong client background, and a graduate degree.
I believe I'm a great fit for this job because I have industry experience, a strong client background, and a graduate degree.
I believe that I'm a great fit for this job because I have industry experience, a strong client background, and a graduate degree.
Okay, so I think we'd all agree that, well, probably it's going to be that final person, but let's break it down and figure out why. So here in this case, and by the way, this is not a gender, this is not a male-female difference here, because I hear men that have the same thing that the woman had, and I hear women that have the same thing that the men had. So let's break this down. The first example, the woman, she had an upswing to her voice. And so as she's going along, her voice goes up at the end. And all of a sudden, you as a listener start to question. So you're questioning, gosh, is she sure of herself? Why is she coming across like she's unsure? She's questioning herself. So that's what comes across there. Now, she's lacking a little bit of that credibility, but she has more connection in her voice. So she has more of the ups and downs in her voice, sort of how she would normally speak. We've got these ups and downs as we're talking with friends and family. That's how we want to come across. The second example was a really monotone version. So he talked like this the entire time. Now that might sound a little bit more credible, but there's no connection there. There's not any rapport building that's coming out of that. You don't want to listen to that person over a long period of time. And again, you probably had a couple of professors like that. I know that I did. So how do we think, and you can watch that all the time. You're gonna see this will be a blessing and a curse. You're gonna go, oh, okay, that's what's going on there. That's what's going on there with this person. So you think about the tone of voice and how critical, how important that is. Now in the third example, it had the perfect blend of both. So it had both the credibility and the connection coming together. That's what you're going for when it comes to tone of voice. And it boosts your credibility up as you're speaking to others. Now, the last piece that adds to credibility here is thinking about language and pausing. And when we think about language, I want you to pay particular attention to filler words and non-words. So filler words, things like, well, you know, like, and, right? Take a look at this example here, and you'll hear a non-word come into play.
This project is, a key pillar of our bigger strategy for next year. And, it's vital to have, the right financial support in place so we can, hire the right people for the team,
Boy, they look really excited to be there, don't they? They look really, excited to be there, So the creeps in, and all of a sudden it just takes away from the experience. He would be more credible. He would come across more effective if you just took the out of it. So understand what are some code habits as it relates to these behaviors of trust. So we'll list them here back on the screen for you. And as you look through these, what maybe have you gotten feedback on before? Maybe that's been pointed out by a significant other, by a family member, by someone at work. You probably have a good idea of something that you need to work on. It's like, gosh, I need to work on those non-words because I say like every other word, or I say when I get really uncertain and nervous, or maybe my eye communication isn't as strong as it could be, which takes away from that confidence. So this is all about connection. It's about credibility. As you think about these, I love this study that was done by Amy Cuddy from Harvard Business School. She's a social psychologist. And she sought out to understand, how do we think about the way that people come across and how we relate to them? And she said, there's this interesting dynamic between warmth and competence. And so we think about when we're meeting a person for the first time. I'm meeting you for the first time. My goal is to project as much competence as possible. I want you to know that I know what I'm talking about. And yet, you on the other side are seeking warmth. You're seeking that connection. That's what we do when we're meeting other people. We want to know that we can build some trust and rapport through them, and that comes through warmth. And in fact, she says warmth is a conduit of influence. And so it's about balancing that warmth and competence together. At Decker, one of our core values is humble confidence. Humble confidence. And I think that comes across in a lot of these behavioral skills in terms of how you can approach that. So it's the humility, which is, when you think about job interviews, it's that humility and coming from a place of really wanting to learn, but then also having the confidence in all the experience, all the studying, all of the work that you've done to get there. So it's the two that come together. So think about this. Here's your job, is to think about and pick 2 behavioral pivot points, 2 of those behavioral skills that you need to work on. Write them down right now. Pick 2 things that you're going to be on the lookout for, because just being aware of it is the very first step of the challenge. So as soon as you become aware of non-words, then you can start doing things like replacing with a pause. As soon as you become aware that maybe you're looking down as you're thinking or interacting with others, then you need to work on eye communication. As soon as you become aware of, okay, I'm really nervous, and so I get a little bit more serious, even though I'm communicating good news. I know I need to lighten up my facial expression, for example. So those are the things to focus on. Pick 2 things as it relates to building that emotional connection. All right, so let's move on. I love, because we're going to start shifting into content here, this quote by Chris Anderson, who's a curator for TED, is so great. He said, what would happen if you wanted to persuade people to come along with you on a journey? Well, you have to start where they are and give them a reason to come with you. Start where they are and give them a reason to come with you. Now, if we go back to the communicator's roadmap here, you'll see that we don't often start where they are. We start where we are. We don't start where they are. And so that's our challenge here, is how do we move from having this self-centered content and draw it over to having audience-centered content? That is our challenge. And there's one huge thing that gets in the way, and it's something very sinister called the curse of knowledge. Now, the curse of knowledge states that, and this is something that behavioral economists and psychologists have been studying for years and years and years, and they found that it's really hard not for you not to know what you know. It's hard for you not to know what you know. So you go into a situation with an existing base of knowledge and you're trying to get that message across, but you might be talking to someone, more often than not, who doesn't have that same base of knowledge. So that's how we get these mismatched messages. That's how communication fails all the time. It's simply because the curse of knowledge. Now, let me give you an example. And that is like, if I was, for example, to call, something goes wrong with my computer. I'm going to call IT and I'm going to say, fix my computer. And IT, in my experience, I will call them and they will start talking to me in processing speeds and gigahertz and all kinds of things that I don't understand at all. Now, in that case, I'm a victim of the curse of knowledge. So they're so cursed by their own knowledge, and I'm on the other side going, what the heck are you talking about? I just want to know what button do I push to make the problem go away. Now, you might have felt this before, but if you haven't, I want everybody to really feel what the curse of knowledge feels like to motivate you to get out of it. And so I'm going to highlight this classic study by Elizabeth Newton. Back in 1990, she was a student at Stanford University, and she was out to get her PhD in psychology. She conducted an experiment called tappers and listeners. And what she did is she took her group of subjects, she divided them up into two. She had a group of tappers and a group of listeners. The tappers had to tap out the tune, just on the table, had to tap out the tune to a well-known song. And the listener's job was to guess what that song was. Now that might sound easy for us, but turns out it's a pretty darn difficult thing to do. We're going to replicate that experiment here today. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to, all of us together, where you are in your place right now, wherever that might be, we're going to clap out the tune. You're going to be able to play both sides of this. So you will be a tapper, but rather than just tap, we'll clap. So rather than tap, we're going to clap out the tune to a song, and then I'm going to have you guess a song after that. All right, so here we go. We're going to clap out the tune to Happy Birthday. Everybody together, right where you are, I want you to join me in clapping out Happy Birthday. All right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, did you get it? You felt it? All right, so you just clapped out that tune. You heard it in your head. You're kind of probably singing along. That's typically what we do. Now, I want you to play the listener role. I'm going to clap out a tune, and you need to guess what it is. All right? So everybody get ready, put your good listening ears on, and your job is to guess what song I'm clapping out. All right. Anybody have a guess? Anyone? So when I do this in person, and we've got a little bit more interactivity that I can see, we'll have all kinds of guesses, but by far and away, probably to the tune again of about 92%, just like this, we find that people heard the clapping, so that's good. You heard clapping, but it just was sort of a random rhythmic clapping. You had no idea what the song was. Well, that song was "We Are the Champions" by Queen. So if anybody got it, you let me know. put it on Twitter or something that you had that down. So we are the champions by Queen. Now, again, in general, we don't know what the heck that is. Now, here's the thing. What was the difference between when you were clapping out the tune to the song versus when I was clapping out the tune to the song? So when you're clapping, what do you hear? You're singing along the words, you hear the melody, you're kind of going along with it, you're all in it. But on the other side, when you just hear that clapping, it's just random rhythmic clapping. So Elizabeth Newton, here's what she did. She took that next step. And she asked her students in this subject, in this experiment that she ran, she took that next step and she asked her subject, she said, hey, what percentage of time do you think that the listeners are going to get it right? So she asked the tappers, and the tapper said, well, I'm such a good tapper, and it makes perfect sense in my head that they should get it 1 out of every 2 times. 50% of the time, they're going to nail it. When in fact, the research showed they only got it right 1 out of every 40 times. So here's the big implication for all of us as communicators. They only got it right 1 out of every 40 times. Here's someone who's sending a message who is certain within 2 chances that they're going to understand, when in fact, it only comes across 1 out of every 40 times. So how often are we, because of our own cursive knowledge, clapping out the tune to songs, and there's a tune playing in our head that isn't playing in other people's head as well? So it's a huge, huge lesson for all of us in communications, because we have to get out of our cursive knowledge. And so to do that, we think about our listener. And we want to think, gosh, how might we be cursed? So how do we step into that and go, all right, so let me highlight a couple of things for you. And so you've been with we're on day 7, I think, of the externship now. So you've had some experience to AT&T, to the leaders here. Now I can speak from personal experience as well, because I also was an intern. And I came in and I started hearing things that sounded like this. So take a look at this quote. So we might talk about AT&T business customers and providing services for them that streamline collaboration, communication, and management to mobilize people, processes, and assets. And that probably makes sense to a lot of people within AT&T. And they're going, yeah, that's great. That's exactly what we do for our business customers. And yet on the other side, not only you, but the actual customers are going, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? So there's a cursive knowledge in play. Or take this one. So for consumers, well, they expect their online data to be protected by a comprehensive and uniform privacy regime that applies across the entire internet ecosystem and includes operating systems, browsers, devices, ISPs, apps, online services, and advertising networks. Again, you're going, okay, that probably makes sense for the consumer group within AT&T, but how does that message translate? And that is the prime task for a sticky idea, a message that changes the way that someone thinks or acts about you, about your topic, about whatever you're bringing to bear, about your idea, for example. And so how do we think about getting out of the cursive knowledge? And what might this sound like for you? So what's the tune that might be playing in your head? And let's apply this to interviews, for example. And as you're talking about yourself, you're trying to sell yourself. So you are influencing, you're trying to influence and inspire someone to change the way they think or act about you and hire you, for example. So you might say something like, well, I'm a team player with the dedication and motivation to drive efficiency throughout the team. I'm a real team player with the dedication and motivation to drive efficiency throughout the team. Now, you've got a tune playing in your head as to what that means. You have examples that go behind that. You have stories that go behind that. You have all the expertise that's behind that. You have to share that. So don't just leave it at that abstraction, because that's the cursive knowledge. There's a tune playing in your head. How do you get them to hear it? Or maybe you say something like this, and you go, gosh, if I just fill it with lots of business jargon, then they'll really get it. So let's hit the ground running. We thrive in a highly collaborative environment. We create synergy and creativity and love to circle back with ideas to close the loop. So get rid of all that business jargon and speak about what you can bring to the table. So here's how you do it. We're going to create messages that motivate. Again, prime task for a sticky idea, a message that changes the way that people think or act about you or your idea, is that you have to cross these boundaries. So cross boundaries from organization to organization, from person to person, from inside the organization to outside the organization. So you do two things: make it about them, and then make the message stick with concrete examples and stories. When you make it about them, you take all of those things, like, how are you a team player? Show me, tell me a great example. And most importantly, tell me how that relates to me. So a lot of us are really good. We've gotten good and practiced at interviewing and laying down our strengths and having examples for those. Now make those examples apply to the organization, apply to the team specifically, apply to how you can add value there. So to the extent that you can find out about your listener, it will always benefit you. So listeners, it doesn't matter how many people you have in the room, find out what you can, and then take that message. You're going to take a self-centered message. I am talking about me as I'm trying to sell myself in an interview, for example, and I'm going to make it about them instead. So you're adding these examples and things that then resonate with them really effectively. And all of a sudden, they change the way they think or act about you and the value that you're going to bring to the team. So make it about them. This goes for even for your jobs, for working in extracurricular activities, for leading organizations, for participating in organizations. When you're selling an idea, it's not about you, it's about them. How do you make that message even more relevant to them? So think about those listeners in the room or in the virtual room. And then finally, make the message stick with concrete examples and stories. So I love this saying that logic makes you think and emotion makes you act. Logic makes you think and emotion makes you act. So you can lay out a really nice logical argument. You're all very, very well versed in doing that from all the classes that you're in. I mean, you're architecting these arguments all the time. But as you do that, what's something that you can add to that to bring it to life? Well, it's something that we call SHARPS. And SHARPS is just an acronym for stories, humor, analogies, references and quotes, and pictures and visuals. So how do you add this to the message, again, to help bring it to life? So you can take all those, like, I'm a great team player who does this and this and this, but add a great concrete example or story to it. And all of a sudden, then you have a message that sticks. Let me give you an example here. This is one I love telling. So as part of our training programs that we conduct and we run, we do a lot of video feedback. So we record people, we play it back for them so that they can see it. We've got 2-day-long programs where they come in and you get videotaped like 9 times. It's so painful. And actually, that's not the painful part. The painful part is that we make you watch the video. So you have to watch it and you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I do all that stuff. All right, so this one individual comes in and he was creating his message. So we have part of our program that works on all those delivery skills. And then we have part of our program that talks about how do you architect this great message and add these stories and examples into it. And so we had an engineer come into one of our programs. It was an open program. So we had people from all kinds of different companies and levels come into this program. And I happened to be leading this one, and this engineer was in the program, and we got to this part about SHARPS and adding stories. And he was like, nope. He was all logic. That's it. He had a nice logical argument. He was trying to convince his management team that they had to adopt a set of technical standards. That was what he was doing. That was it. And we get to SHARPS. He's like, forget it. No way. And he comes back the next day and he starts his message. He's giving his final kind of presentation of the program. And he comes in and he goes, I was looking up SHARPS last night. I was trying to find the right thing to share with all of you. And I found this really interesting story about the city of Baltimore. Because remember that he's trying to make, his whole case is, he's trying to get his management team to adopt a set of technical standards. That's what his whole goal is to do. Adopt a set of technical standards, which might be important, but for a management team, it's probably kind of low and way on the back burner in terms of priorities. So how does he get them to care enough about it? So here's what he does. He comes in the next day and he says, all right, I was looking up SHARPS and I found this really interesting story about the city of Baltimore. The city of Baltimore back in 1906 burnt to the ground. 1904, burnt to the ground. The entire city was leveled and it was a huge tragedy. It didn't have to happen. what happened is that in the center of the fire started in the center of the city. And so they called in all the firehouses and fire engines and fire people, and they came in and they tried to help fight the fire. So they took the fire hoses and they connected them with the fire hydrants in the center of the city to try to fight the fire. Well, it quickly got out of hand. So they started calling in fire resources, firefighters from the surrounding communities. So all these surrounding communities come in with their fire people and their fire engines so here they are. And they come in with their fire hoses from these different communities around the city. And they come in with their fire hoses and they try to connect to the fire hydrant in the center of the city, and they can't connect because there was no standard way of connecting a fire hose to a fire hydrant back in 1904. So here you have all these resources. You've got availability to fight this fire, and you can't connect the hose to the hydrant. And he said, our organization will burn to the ground if we don't adopt this set of technical standards. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It's like mic drop. It was incredible. So he takes this amazing story, makes this point, and it was phenomenal. So when you add these stories, you add these concrete examples, and then all of a sudden your brain shifts from this logical, I'm only thinking logic, emotion makes you act. You have to have the logical bit laid out, but emotion makes you act. So we caught up with him after he actually did pitch this to his management team. They did approve it. So it was a huge win. But it's how do you, not only you think about them, you make the message about them. So you're using examples that then apply to them, how they can think about it differently. And then you're bringing it to life through all these great stories. So make it about them, add your stories and concrete example. So as we wrap up here, let me just head back over to the roadmap and think, gosh, don't just inform people, inspire them. You can inform them, but you want to influence and inspire them to change the way they think or act about you, about your ideas. I mean, when I step back and I think about how much value interns can provide, how much value new employees can provide to an organization, because you're not cursed by knowledge, because you have fresh ideas, because you're bringing such a diversity of experience. That is the value that you have. And if I think back to my experience as an intern, then the advice that I got was lean in. I found myself in these meetings where I have no business being here, or they just kind of invited me to sort of see it as an intern, from an intern point of view. But then they asked, well, you should speak up. You should say something. And I'm going, gosh, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do here. Think about your listeners. What would add value here? How can you ask some questions? Lean in with curiosity that allows them to see the value that you can provide. So we do that through building that emotional connection. Again, that's building trust and rapport and likability, all those behavioral skills. And then you shift that content from self-centered content to audience-centered content. And all of a sudden, you're adding a ton of value. So let me leave you with this quote that before we launch into Q&A here. I love this by Will Rogers. He's an old-time American actor. And he said, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. So this is such a phenomenal opportunity for all of you. This externship program is incredible. The academy that you're all part of right now, you're getting on the right track. Now your job is to stay on the right track, but you got to keep moving, keep learning, keep leaning in, keep asking questions. And with that, I will turn it over for some questions.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I mean, this externship opportunity, like you said, is once in a lifetime. You know, believe it or not, this is not my day job either. I'm learning just as much as they are. And so I think my pivot points from your talk will be to pause for inflection and then pull that sharp presentation style into my broadcast. And so you externs hold me accountable for that. So I'm excited to keep going and learning and taking what you've told us today into my presentation. I'm sure all the students will have found value in it as well. So I'll get into our questions. Our first question today comes from Rosie, and she's asking, during this time when most of our communication is virtual, how can a high emotional conversation or experience be achieved?
Thanks for the question, Rosie. So as we think about, the virtual experience, we really can do a lot. I mean, we have the benefit of these platforms that are so powerful and have these great features. So the number one thing that we're working with all of our clients on right now is how do you make the most of it? So that's on the top minds of leaders in every company in every industry right now. So it's not just, that question's so great for you, but it's on the minds of everyone. It's like, in this new virtual world, how do I actually connect with people? So if we think about those behaviors of trust, it's both about that connection and credibility. So number one, make sure your video is on. You want to add as much to the experience as you can. So make sure that video is on, because I have joined so many of these calls where everybody's video is off. I turn it on and then invite them to join me, and also turn their video on so that we can have a conversation, because there's so much that can get lost in the experience. We want to add those inputs as much as we can. So video is a wonderful way to do that. Make sure that video is on, and then just be aware of your habits around it. And then the final piece is around engagement. So how do you continue to engage people, asking questions, make it as interactive as possible? That's how you can add and boost that emotional connection.
It's good advice. I know a lot of people are weary of turning their video on, but it's definitely important for that emotional connection. So our next question comes from Helen. She's asking, how do you recommend creating smooth and effective conversation between different generations, considering both a viewpoint and a language interpretation difference? It's a very good question.
Yes. Okay. So different generations happens all the time, and especially when you're working with an organization like AT&T that has such a history, and you have team members that have been part of the company for 30 plus years, and then you've got interns that are coming in that don't have that experience. And so understanding it all comes down to the listener. So this goes back to, how do you shift from self-centered content to audience-centered content, or from self-centered to audience-centered? And that requires that you just think about your listener. So anytime you can, it could be a generational thing, this could be an organizational thing, it doesn't matter. You always want to consider who your listener is. So you can step back and just ask yourself a couple key questions like, okay, if I'm talking to this person about this topic, how do they feel about it? What do they know about it already? That'll help you get out of your curse of knowledge. What are they expecting from this meeting? How can I help them? And then why might they challenge the idea that I'm bringing forward? So if you just kind of step back and think through a couple of key questions as it relates to your listener or listeners, however many people you might be speaking to, then all of a sudden you step back, you've got that perspective in mind, and then the way that you bring the topic to them is a little bit different. And that should always change. I mean, that's kind of a messaging 101 thing, but we fall into the habit of saying, oh, this is my agenda, this is what I'm driving forward, the end. Versus, I might have the same topic, but I need to communicate that really differently to my peers, to people below me, to people above me in the organization. And so how do I tweak that message? And you always start with who your listener is. So just ask a couple of those key questions can help tremendously.
Absolutely. So our next question is one that we've frequently gotten for our speakers about introverts versus extroverts. So our question is, how might communicating to influence differ between introverts and extroverts? Do you have to be extroverted to be an effective communicator?
You do not have to be extroverted to be an effective communicator. In fact, the majority of our team, it was very funny, we took a Myers-Briggs test, we all went through this together, and the majority of our team, we had about 40 people on our team, we're all introverts. And I think we were all shocked to sort of find that out. They're the ones that are out there, they're leading programs. So the introversion, extroversion piece more is around how do you recharge, how do you find that energy coming back? That doesn't mean that you can't push energy out as you are communicating to influence. And so you still take those things to engage. It might be something that for introverts, you need to dial it up a little bit more, but that's it. Those same skills apply to every single person. And so it's just about kind of stepping back again, what kind of experience do I want to create? If I'm trying to get people engaged and involved, I want to make sure that it's not about me, it's about them. And so how can I create an experience for them that helps show how passionate I am about this idea, how excited I am about this idea, and ultimately why they should also buy off on this idea. So I don't see it as an introversion, extroversion thing. We all have different habits. We have different things that we can work on. It just might take a little bit of different fine tuning.
Absolutely. I think some of the best speakers sometimes are introverts because they have to work a little bit harder to have that presence, right? So our next question comes from Richard. He's asking, how can effective communication techniques at the business and professional level be applied to people on a personal/everyday level?
Oh my gosh, let me tell you how I'm communicating to influence at home all the time. So I have, of course, my husband, and I have 3 boys that are aged almost 12, almost 14, and almost 16. So they're all kind of on the precipice of birthdays right now. So communicating with teenagers is something that I have to do all the time. And so there are so many times that I sit back and I go, oh, it's like forehead to palm. And I go, why am I approaching it this way? I shouldn't be approaching it this way. And step back and I think, all right, who's my listener? Well, my son, one of them, doesn't necessarily care about the workday and the other things that I have to go. So how do I come at him with a message that will get him to hear that? So I have to step back and think about those kinds of things as well. Just from you always think about your listeners. But I think more importantly, as we think about this shift from personal to professional and how we think about communicating in these 2 different areas, one of the things that is a huge myth is that there's an on-off switch with communicating. There is no on-off switch with communicating. So many times we'll be talking to somebody, for example, I might be coaching an executive and we're sitting there talking. I say, okay, well, why don't you go ahead and stand up and go ahead and present on that work topic and we'll break it down and see how we can make it more effective. And they get up and it's like switch, totally different person. So either maybe they become more robotic or they suddenly have this crazy stage presence. And the key here is to be authentically you. So what we work on most of the time with executives is that we're trying to take who they are with friends and family at a backyard barbecue and bring that into the work environment. That's who they are. That's what's likable about them. So how do we bring that into every experience? You don't suddenly just step into work mode and then become this very robotic, more serious, not connecting person. So that authenticity is huge. So take them and bring them into both environments.
Absolutely. So our next question, I think, is very fitting for our audience and then just where we're at today with social media. So Ashley is asking, do you think our generation has a harder time communicating as a result of cell phones and social media? Do you think we tend to hide behind our phones to communicate?
Oh, Ashley, I don't make like generational statements. I think there are so many nuances within there for sure. So, but having said that, I think that there's that range that exists. So there are people that would rather, I work with on my own team. I've got younger generations who will opt for a text or they'll opt for an email instead of picking up the phone, instead of calling somebody over video. So those kinds of interactions are huge and they're so powerful. When it comes to influencing, when we have a very important point that we want to make, when there's an idea that we want to put forward, if it's something that we're really passionate about, we often want to get right in front of that person. And we want to have that face-to-face communication, face-to-face contact because it's so powerful, because we can come across and show our passion, excitement, enthusiasm for it, and the other person can see that. We buy off on that. We buy on emotion, we justify with fact. And so an email doesn't do the same thing. A text message doesn't do the same thing. It doesn't have the power there. It might be easier to fall into as a habit, but my suggestion would be, ditch if that is your, and that's not for everybody. Not everybody does that. But if that is a tendency and you're realizing that, go, oh my gosh, I'd much rather send an email or send a text here than to try to interact or pick up the phone or anything like that. Because it's safer, because now I'm putting that ball in somebody else's court and I don't have to do anything. If they don't do anything, then that's it. You will have far more impact when you communicate in person as much as you can. Now, of course, in today's world, it's a little bit more limited, but again, come back to video. Use any way to engage with people that you can. You'll build more trust, you'll build more rapport, you'll build the relationship you need to move things forward.
Absolutely. All right, our next question is, Do you think that adding emotional triggers to your presentation is better to influence the audience, or is it your presentation skills that matter more?
Oh, it's all of it. It's all of it. It all matters. I mean, when we think about the three V's and we think about the verbal, the vocal, the visual, so we know how that emotional connection, how all those behavioral skills help build that trust and rapport and likability and believability, all those things that are so key. But we also create an emotional experience by adding those sharps in there. So as we tell those stories, that emotional component by way of content is hugely important too in helping us build that emotional connection. So it's all important, but think about them just as different levers. Don't try to, by the way, don't try to do all of this at one time. That's not going to be helpful because you're going to be trying to change too many things. That's why I said pick two behaviors, that's it. And just think about two things related to content. That's all. Don't try to do everything at once. Just try a little lever this one time, a little lever this another time, and see what's working for you and what you can learn from.
That's very good advice. So our last question, I think is very important, something I struggle with as well, comes from Lynn Marie, and she's asking, what is a good way to practice vocal energy? I have a problem with adding too much inflection to my voice and coming across as trying too hard or speaking in a monotone voice.
Vocal energy is a tough one, Lynn Marie. I totally can understand where you're coming from here. It's a tough one to do. It's a tough one to practice. And your voice will sound so different in your own ear than it does to other people. That has to do with actually the way that you hear your. So one thing to do to practice this is simply and that's what you do for any of these things. So whether it's you can try to isolate your voice by way of audio recording. So just grab your phone, hit record on your phone on your next conference call that you're on. And just listen to the sound of your voice and then think, okay, what do I need to step back and tweak? What might be missing? Is it more of that credibility feel or is it more of that connection feel? Where do I need to balance that out? And the great thing is, what I love about your question, it sounds like you're trying really hard. Number one, you're aware of it and you're trying already. So now just record and try to give yourself some self-feedback in that process. So, and again, treat them as levers. So we're trying to build that warmth and connection and credibility coming together. Testing, recording, listening back, that is the way to do it.
That's great advice, Kelly. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Like I said, your presentation was so powerful and impactful for me, so I'm sure the students have gotten a lot from you today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Les. Thanks to everybody, and good luck for the rest of the summer.
All right, well, that concludes our live session for this week. Like I said, my takeaways for this week are the pivot points, right? So I'll be practicing on pausing for inflection and pulling some of that sharp presentation style into my presentation. So later this afternoon, we have Kirk McDonald joining us at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. So meet us back here at the studio, and we'll see you later.
mamá. Mamá, mira que tu mamá. Mamá, mamá. A ver, tú di mamá, mamá. Ven, mi amor, te vas a caer, ven.
Sorry. Yes. You're maxed out on most people. I'll consider for that. Making good progress. I'll have to provide any door of distance for them to settle in Mexico.
At least you can do some security.
I'll consider finding out. I'll adjust your trip.
Como idea is severed femoral artery carcinoma, the renal and it's still a temporary shut. There are MRI results.
mi vida ya. A ver. How's my son?
Marco's femur is completely shattered, and his lower leg isn't getting enough blood.
Can you save his leg?
Marco suffered too much bone fragmentation. We can't fix it. Our only choice is to amputate.
Yeah, period one. I used to get period one, but I remember the ingredients. So, yeah, it's right there.
Ha hecho apujado. A ver, ¿qué necesito? ¿Qué necesito? No te vayas a caer, no seas sonso. Cagó, pero no importa. Es una bolita porque lo he visto. Sus ojitos. Pero comió su huevo, comió su fruta, su papilla y comió blueberries. Los blueberries le van en el estómago. Ahorita me dice, mira, vamos a cambiar, ¿ya? Muy bien, muy bien. Ay, a mí me ha robado mi control. Sí. No, voy a ponerlo, préstame. Ay, lo siento, está ocupado. No puede ahorita, no puede. Ay, no, mami, que no machuque. No machucame. Machuque, bebé. Me has robado. ¿A qué te dejas robar? Me has robado, oye, no. No, dices, no. Ahí está, mami, dámelo, mami. Ahí está, mira. Pero ¿cómo te voy a dar si estoy con mi bebé? Ahí, dámelo. Tíralo. Ya, ahí está. Gracias. Ya te lo dio. Te lo devolvió. Es buena gente. Es buena gente. Pero buena gente. Gracias.
I've got my way all planned out. I've got the dress and the flowers.
Maybe get okay.
All I need is the groom. You available, Dr. Rick?
No. No, I don't. I don't want love.
No consequence.
How does it work? Sean. Patient scans are very important.
My patient's important too.
I need to see my patient scans.
Is your patient pre-op or post-op?
Pre-op?
Okay, on your computer, you apologize first.
Okay, I'm sorry. Turn it on.
Ya, ahora sí anda.
Why was Marco's family crying when Dr. Melendez told him his leg would need to be amputated?
Their son's leg is about to be cut off. It's sad. Crying is normal.
But when your options are amputation or death, amputation is good news.
People need time to adjust to big changes. Marco's family didn't even get a chance to pray for a miracle.
It's not possible. Bone damage is too severe. rod implantation won't work. There's nothing to anchor into. And the shunt won't last long enough to do reconstruction. There are no other options.
What if we could replace the entire femur?
We're making him a new finger. It's a 3D printer. And bones will have successfully been done with man.
We know.
It's a really small bone. It has to support the weight of the entire body.
Ah, ¿qué cosa cree? Levántate. Tiene que tomar su segundo desayuno con un pancito. No tiene más tomado. Ya comió su huevo, ya comió su papilla, ya comió su grande. Levántate tú, dice, levántate. Sí. ¿Te bajó? Ay, mamá. Ay, mamá. Ay, Charlotte. Se lo mide como un chanchito. Sí, se ha mirado bastante. Aquí no se ha levantado. Como a las 6. 6 y pico, ya empezaba a quedar ya. Se despertó de oscuro y otra vez se volvió a dormir. Se sentó y yo otra vez se volvió a meter. Se metió bajo mi brazo.
You don't need to talk. Just listen to her. You don't have to come out here. Clear your head. She's trapped in there. Along with her thoughts, her fears. How are you supposed to get out? You, her escape.
You want to put a fake femur into Marco's leg?
It's not fake, it's real.
It's not a real bone. We're making it out of titanium.
It's still real.
That's incredible. And Marco will be able to walk, run, climb.
And swim.
Hopefully. That's the intention.
Well, have you done this surgery before?
I have.
We'll be the first.
Nobody has ever attempted this surgery with a bone as large as the femur. I believe it's a viable option, but there are risks.
Risks. Could Marco die?
In my estimation, there's a 10% chance he won't make it.
Then no. I'm not losing my son. Wait, if there's a chance we can save Marco's leg, we should at least discuss this some more. That's what he'd want. He'd want to live. He'd want to have a life. I know him. He'd want to take the chance. I will never forgive myself if Marco died because I made a reckless decision. This decision is
Does he have healthcare proxy?
I don't know what that is.
And when the accident happened, were you on the way to your wedding or on the way back?
We were headed to his wedding.
Marco's parents were next of kin. They decided.
Please. Get consider ourselves like.
Murphy.
Tell me how you feel. How you feel? How you feel?
Hey, do you happen to have a tampon? What size? There's more than one size. It's about your flow, okay? It changes, so should your Tampax. Only Tampax has 5 sizes and a leak guard braid. If it hurts to remove, go down. Leaks, go up. Super regular. That's my combo. Tampax. The only tampon with a leak guard braid to help give you more leak-free periods. Have the Tampax? What's your combo?
Find your keys. Find your get up and go. Find pants that aren't sweats. Find your friends. Find your sense of wonder. Find the world is new. Again, at Chevy, we like to take you there. Now during the Chevy Open Road Sales Event, get up to 15% of MSRP cash back on select 2020 models. That's over $5,700 cash back on this Equinox. It's time to find new roads again. Why is the primary closure on the stump so vital in amputation surgery?
For proper prosthetic fitting. Why are you marrying Jessica?
When does anyone get married?
I don't know.
I love her.
I don't understand why having someone to love is so important to everyone.
You have to stand down. You can't amputate with this leg.
Why not?
I filed an emergency injunction to stop the surgery. You were in a car accident, your neck was punctured, and repair surgery went well. You're gonna have to stay put for a week before you can really sleep. But we're gonna keep you alive.
Can I see her?
She's not listed. That's the good thing. She's probably still on the waiting room. I'll find her, bring her up. She'll be relieved to know you're okay.
Okay.
What the hell am I supposed to do with an unconscious patient whose leg isn't taking time off?
Judge Singh isn't rich. She wants to hear from both parties. I would love to see the case.
I have to testify?
Hopefully not.
I thought you would be happy. You thought you could save the leg, and I didn't want that not happening because the parents are afraid to make a tough call.
It's their call to make.
And if the accident happened an hour later, it would be the wife's. And she wants the pig leg.
It's not fake.
I thought you didn't believe in just blindly following the protocol.
He's their son. Nobody's gonna love him more than them.
Seriously? All parents love all children more than anybody else?
We get divorced all the time. How often do they give up their kids?
So this was us. You want your parents to decide a way.
I didn't say that.
You kind of did.
I was saying there needs to be rules. That there needs to be bright red lines telling us who gets to make these calls. It's the parents' call.
Not anymore. That's the judge's. How much time does Mark have left on the temporary?
3 hours. And then his leg will die.
Dr. Torture returns. That I'd scared you off for good.
Pick a movie. Just ask you out on the phone for the talk to.
You think Groundhog Day's gonna make a difference? I'm torturing you, but hey, you get to watch a funny movie.
That is sort of what I was going for, yeah. I'm sorry. There's not something else I could do.
How do you know there isn't?
This is protocol. This is what they teach you.
Lucked out. I got the world's greatest expert on burn victims. You know everything that can be done.
He loves to rock climb, scuba dive, bungee jump. This is insane. His leg is literally dying while we sit here reminiscing. Please, we're trying to figure out what your son would want.
I want that too, but if there's a way that we can save Marco's leg, he'd want me to do it.
Do you know what he wanted? Most of all, he wanted to marry you. He wanted to spend his life with you, have children with you. Now, he can do all that. He can be happy with a prosthetic leg. He's young and he's strong. He can get through this.
I don't care about your stories. I don't care that you met rock climbing, kayaking, or whatever. I just
We
want.
met in rehab.
Are either of you Jenna Hensel? I haven't seen Jenna since we took pictures at the hotel. But she got on the bus.
Yeah,
Yeah, she was sitting near me. She's still out there. Hey guys, we gotta go back.
Where?
To the crash site now. He never wanted you to know. He's an addict. He replaced one addiction for another one, a healthier one, but he needs.
What? He needs to wake ward or he'll drink himself to death? This is ridiculous.
No, it's not. We talked about it a lot. It's pretty much all you do in rehab. Marco has clarity for the first time in his life. He knows what makes him happy. He knows his weaknesses. He's not as strong as you think. And that's okay. But
Marco cheated on you. It was about a month ago. He was overwhelmed with the wedding and the planning. He ran into an ex-girlfriend. It only happened once.
you're lying. You're upset that he had secrets from you, so
She's not trying. Yeah, he was so upset. He does love you.
Okay, maybe we're digressing here a little bit. We really don't have the time.
It matters. She doesn't know him like maybe none of us do, but we are his parents. And you're not his wife yet.
Apartments.com puts more renters in new homes than any other website. How? By sniffing out more listings than anybody else. Really?
Overwhelmed with the wedding and the planning. He ran into an ex-girlfriend. It only happened once.
you're lying. You're upset that he had secrets from you, so
She's not lying. Yeah, he was so upset. He does love you.
Okay, maybe we're digressing here a little bit. We really don't have the time.
It matters. She doesn't know him like maybe none of us do, but we are his parents. And you're not his wife yet.
When water is filtered through 10,000-year-old glacial aquifers that make it rich with naturally occurring electrolytes, it has a crisp taste like no other. Poland Spring Origin, born in Maine, for the earth, for the better.
Dinner with the drapes tonight. Alexa, ask Taylor to start my own for GX. Fourthly.
You know this dinner's for their
Kids. Thanks for watching them.
the first ever Buick Encore GX. Now everyone can get the GM employee discount on most 2020 with SUV models.
Zero sugar. Still sugar.
You probably think all pads are the same. They either leak or feel like a diaper. But have you tried Always Infinity Flex Foam? It's the only pad made of flex foam, not fluff, so it works differently. Flex foam continuously pulls fluid away from your body so the top stays dry. And unlike other pads, it locks fluid away along the bottom layer, so you can't even feel it. Even on heavy days, Flex Foam absorbs 50% more. That's 7 times more than you would need. and it doesn't budge. 0 leaks and 0 feel is possible with Always Infinity FlexFlow.
Dr. Andrews, insiders may be eligible for experimental version. Celebrate. San Diego Community Hospital Australia has been following a Brazilian hospital protocol for baptizing flappy skins. Now, I know this is gonna sound a bit crazy, but I was thinking we could do the same thing here. Dr. Kalu, I applaud your thinking, but flappy skins contain more collagen proteins both touch one and three than human skin, which aids in tissue repair and gives you grass and serves to accelerate healing, reduce infection, and cut down on the patient's physical pain.
Are you finished, or would you like to cut me off again? Okay, let's follow this loop, shall we? You have to come up with a proposal for the experimental treatment, get it approved by our institutional review board, get your hands on medical grade tilapia skins, and then
Well, you know, that's what the process.
you think I could bring it down from 3 months to 2 hours? You finished the debridement? Okay, I'll take over from here. Hey, keep me outside the box. Initiative is good.
I'm in. Fiber. Did you get me the drill?
Sure.
Okay, well, she asked us to drill him with home causing increased cranial pressure. If I don't alleviate it now, there's no way she makes it to the hospital alive. Unconscious female flip chest.
She's good to go to the OR. So, girl,
Favorite posturing, a low left pupil. I test the drill that through the skull, a whole lot of blood through the mouth.
San Diego Community Hospital. Extending the tilapia skins, they made it back in the should be here within the hour. So let's see. You meet the criteria for the experimental treatment that I think will prevent you from having to undergo skin graft.
Hold up. How does this happen?
Well, I find out San Diego Pro allows for